Okay, welcome to Advisory Design Panel for Thursday, May 21st. We will start the meeting by acknowledging that we're holding this electronically on the Squamish Nation traditional territory. One of the first things that I'll do is read the procedures for electronic meetings. And that goes as follows. Committee members attending the meeting electronically are required to advise the chair of the meeting of the following circumstances. When the committee member disconnects and or reconnects, enters or exits the meeting so that this can be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Item B, committee members are to identify themselves when they advise the chair that they wish to be placed on the speakers list. Item C, with respect to a vote, committee members are only required to state a nay vote. No statement is required if the member is in favor. Item D, committee members shall put the telephone or computer on mute unless they wish to speak. And with that said, we'd like the consultants and the proponents to keep themselves on mute and their video off until it's their turn to speak. Item E here is the committee members shall be involved in and participate in the meeting. F, committee members shall text the EAO or the corporate officer if they have technical difficulty with their telephone or computer. And in the past, we've stated a number to call if somebody drops off the line. Asia, it was Jonas before, but do we have a number that can be reached if somebody drops off?
Yes, so I've actually posted my cell number in the chat area.
Okay.
So if everybody's okay and is able to access that, then I think we're good. So I have my phone right beside me, so yeah, just give me a shout if you drop off.
Can we state that number so that everyone can record it?
Sure. Yeah, it's 604-791-5015.
That's 015. Okay, thank you very much. Item G on this procedures list is the meeting shall be recessed for up to 10 minutes if a technical difficulty occurs on the district side, which results in the committee member being unable to connect to the meeting. And so that's our procedures. I think at this point I should do a roll call as we've done before, just to make sure that everyone checks in from the panel. So I'll start, once I call your name, just put your hand up or say something. David Arnott? Present. Mike Van Capel? Not present. Tanis Schultz? Present. Here. Jenna Buchko? Present. Sarah Tippler? Present. Jackie Menez? Present. Graham Winterbottom? Present. Brent McMurtry? Present. Brent is here?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm here, John.
Okay, thank you. Carlos Abarche? Farzin Yagaderi? I don't see Farzin. Not present. And then Christina Salen? Present. And myself. Okay.
And there's Jackie Menezes.
Yes, we've got you present.
Oh, okay, I didn't hear you. Sorry, my apologies.
Okay. So no Farzin and no Mike Van Capel.
Hey, John.
Yes.
If I disable my video, it's just I've got like 4 Zoom calls going between school, piano lessons, and work. So if I disappear, I'll come back.
Okay, I see you on our list here.
Okay.
Okay, so moving forward with the meeting, adoption of the agenda for today. Can I have someone to move? David Arnott, and the second is Sarah Tippler. All in favor, or anyone against? No one against? Okay, the agenda is adopted. The next item is adoption of minutes from the last meeting, which was April 30th, 2020. Any discussion on the comments? Sarah?
making a motion to adopt them.
Okay, so no discussion on the comments or any changes necessary? Okay, so Sarah's moving to adopt. A second? We have a second? David Arnott? And anyone against? No one against? So those minutes are adopted. And our first item of business arising, or the only one today, will be DP number 521, which is Main Street Plaza. And we'll hand over to planning staff. Asia.
Thanks very much, John. I'm going to go very quickly through my stuff, and then I'll pass it along to the applicant's team to make the presentation. So in terms of context, this plaza design and installation is part of the amenity package that the Pac West site developer has provided through the rezoning of their mixed-use development project, which is located to the south at the 37870 Cleveland address. So today our focus is totally on the Main Street Plaza space. The mixed-use buildings were previously reviewed at the January ADP meeting, so we'd like to avoid bringing that kind of back into the fold and focus on the plaza design. So the plaza design really quickly, and I believe the applicant will get into this further, so I'll just touch on it. The main overarching concept is of a woonerf, which is a Dutch term for living street, and the idea is that the space is shared between all different modes, pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles. It would primarily be a public social space, so keep that in mind, but we want it to be designed with flexibility so that it could be open or closed to vehicle traffic. And so that was kind of the brief that was given to the applicant. There's been several iterations with them, and we've been working with their team for over a year now through both the rezoning and the DP process. And in general, we're seeking feedback from ADP on the overall design and layout, but specifically on the accessibility aspects, the landscaping and hardscaping design, and we're also keen to hear any ideas that the ADP might have around stormwater management and how that might be integrated into a water feature or another feature of the plaza, as well as ideas. There is an event zone or an event space adjacent to the pavilion, and we're wondering how it could be activated outside of those times of events. Right now it's quite a wide open space, and we're looking for any creative ideas about how we might activate it, as most of the time there won't be events happening. So your feedback on all of those factors are appreciated. And I think with that, I will get the presentation started and pass it along to the applicant. So if Tom, you could turn your video and audio on, and I'll share my screen. Tom, whenever you're ready.
Yes, have you got me on? Good afternoon. The purpose of this first slide, I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but it's for context. But what I notice I want to bring up is that if you look to just across the Municipal Hall at Stan Clark Park, it goes across the street to a park system, and then over to USIM, and then into this plaza. So in a sense, that side, the plaza, the USIM side of the plaza, links into a park system, and on the other side, it links into commercial and the building that was reviewed at the last meeting. So a further definition of a shared space of one is an extension of surrounding spaces. And to reiterate what AJ was saying, to sort of a BC transit sort of guidelines and all, the shared space is a road in which the living environment dominates over the vehicular movement. So it functions first as a meeting place, playground, pedestrian space, and everything else. So then, if you go to the next slide, next image.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Oh,
get
okay.
it to move forward.
We had it before.
Yeah, the keyboard isn't
Um,
working.
Yeah, the purpose of this simple analysis was, and some bubbles, is it's meant to show there's easy transition through the space along the sidewalk on Cleveland. There's an open gathering space that sits right beside the USIM, so that there would be a linkage between events, gatherings at USIM that would overflow or be part of on Main Street Plaza. And it's just to show the linkage with the whole park system. And again, this sort of linkage to the commercial side. One thing I want to bring up is that we show a curve in the road. It's sort of gone back and forth, but our intent right now with the district is it's a straight line as opposed to that bend or chicane that you see in the layout. Next image. This was just our sort of research and review into principles of ownership. I'll just show these briefly because I think you've seen them before and maybe some of you haven't in design now. But around the time we were working on this, I spent 2 weeks in France, and of course, this was my companion, and I was getting grief for taking photos of all these streets and people walking on them. But if you look at the top photo and the photo on the right where the white car is, that strikes me as a busy area that's pedestrian dominant, and the cars are just going slow and biding their time and getting through. And the other thing I noticed in all these places was a contrast of the curb in almost every case that I'd see this, that you would see this contrast. So your eyes began to notice, if I see this white, it means I'm beside the tram, it means I'm beside a vehicle, there's some change going on. And that began to become subconscious and struck me as kind of interesting. So if you go to the next slide. This one, it's in Antibes, and I'm walking around, all of a sudden I notice, here you have commercial on one side. If you look on the top strip, that top panorama, you have commercial on one side, shared space, and vehicle control in the middle, and then park. Again, you see that contrast, and you see the signs that show vehicle control. And I guess this doodad in the middle there goes up and down, so they control the use of that plaza. And again, and you see the outdoor seating that sort of drifts in and out of it. So it just struck me as kind of an interesting comparison. AJ, next slide. This is sort of the design, but I think it has the planting plan and then all the comments on it. But I did an enlargement. If we go to the next slide, AJ. Now, if we go start at the left, you can see the property line in red and the building. So there's outdoor patio space. Then we see sort of linear planting beds, and that's to provide screening between the commercial patios and open space and some kind of sense of safety. That is where we're sort of proposing rain garden, sort of beginning of stormwater management. Now, we haven't dealt in detail with sort of stormwater management, largely because we will be working with the civil engineers and linking into the overall storm management system or what we're going into or not, and also with the detailed grading. Now then, beside that linear strip of planting is a accessible, well, it's a pedestrian 2-meter wide pathway. The paving surface that you're seeing contrast of lighter concrete, darker concrete, sort of in contrast. And the thinking behind that is, well, twofold. One is as a vehicle goes in, they are going to see, why am I seeing light concrete and I'm seeing dark concrete, light concrete? This is different than an average bland piece of asphalt, so therefore there's some reason for this. And the vehicles also come up over to sidewalk level and then flattened out, and then the site's basically flat or tilted to cinder grading. But getting back to the pedestrian walkway, beside that is another kind of transition area where there's a lot of seating, public seating. It's linked to the commercial and has significant planting beds, which again, those can function as rain gardens, depending on how we do the farm living. Then you're seeing the curb, and I'll show in a later section, but that curb is a whiter contrast, as white as we can get it, with white sand or whatever, it's a panel curb, and the dashed line you're seeing in the middle can accommodate drainage, so that the middle of the road can be ground, go off to the side, lift up to the sides, and in whatever fashion we need it, and then link into the catch basins and whatever, or link the planting rain gardens to the catch basin. Now, the orange transparencies that you see, those are 3 meters square, whatever, farmers market or whatever. It's to indicate that this is where we can accommodate that use. And also in those spaces is room for food trucks, whatever the need might be. And in the bottom right there, towards Loggers Lane on the USIM side, it's a seating area, basically, picnic table, long linear seats that orients the view to the chief. It's a fairly large planting bed. Transition over to USIM. At the bottom side of the USIM there is loading and garbage container, which is flexible, that may move around depending on their uses. Up at the top, there is the existing sculpture exists. There's some stacked seating, which I'll show you an image of later on, and a sort of log sitting area that Solterra has done before. And there's stone seating as well, which functions as seating. Kids can climb over, I guess, but we don't call it a playground, but it's to provide a variety of ways of seating and such. I think that's all I want to say for that. And we just go to the next one, Asia. Same image, just simplified and zoomed in, but what I wanted to note was the score marks, saw cuts. They're sort of random, but they're not, but it was meant to, again, have some patterning of the paving, which is another sort of warning system that this is somewhat different than your normal thing. Concrete, not paving, for maintenance reasons that the district would like to see. Next slide, Asia. Let's develop this cross-section just so that there's an understanding of the overall. Again, on the left side, you have the patio planting. There's light bollards on both sides of the 2-meter walkway, the district standard of the Vega, which we show an image of. The flat road, the panel paving, seating, more seating, the existing sculpture in the background. So the message here is this sequence of landscape, open, semi-open, landscape, open area, and a variety of ways and means of seating, etc. In terms of lighting, there's lighting shown. We'll develop that with actual analysis, lighting analysis that shows exactly how the lighting will work. And we'll follow those larger light standards. They're at the back along the road, so we see that those would stay. Lighting in the plaza itself would be a much more pedestrian level, closer to the ground, mid-size, and then a bit taller. And the idea is, again, the vehicle user would go, I'm in a different place. It's not the normal big lights that I would expect. So that visually, lighting-wise, landscape-wise, signage-wise and everything is a system of warnings that tell the driver they are in a different place. I think in Canada, in Europe, from what I see walking on all these streets, that's the norm. This seems unusual in Canada when perhaps it really shouldn't be. So the evolution of these things is, I think, is good. And I guess what I've been learning from this, is it shouldn't seem unusual. This sort of can be a normal way of kind of dealing with traffic and pedestrians. Next one, Agent, please. Now, on this is to show the furnishings, basically. In the middle at the top, you see the kind of style of bike rack we would use. We've sent specifications in the specific bike rack. Solterra is used on another project. Then there's the light bollard. Now, that light bollard got its origins in the district lighting it because we put it into Stan Clark Park. Now, its bug rating is has no up glare and only 101 rating. So, in other words, it's dark sky, kind of compliant. It's a very nice sort of architectural light comes up. It's sturdy, it's well made, good German. It's German, I think, good German light. The next are these kind of style of steel bollards that are as warning systems. They're similar to the ones we saw in the early slides. You caught them. But they would be sort of at the beginning of where you turn into the road. Those are a guard from vehicles to an extra level of guard between vehicles and pedestrians, and be removable, unboltable, or in a sleeve or some format. Below that is a picnic table, Solterra lights with a Maglin, and it's bolted down, movable. It's a very kind of well-styled picnic table. Below that is a stacked timber seating. It's called children's food, but it's basically a seating kind of arrangement. So we have a couple of those on sites, and then along the bottom row you're seeing sawn basalt that we've used on other projects, blended with planting that people use. They sit on it, and it seems to be very successful. And they're evocative of local materials. The middle slide simply to show it's a dark concrete board that's down at Worcester Creek, right at the liquor store there. There's a patio we did there recently and used stained concrete. So that would be the same, very similar. And you can see the score lines faintly, but that would be the dark concrete, light concrete, very light surface. And then the final image is simply to show planting style that we would use there. And it's an image we showed on the last design panel for the building. I think that about covers it. But in review, the objective is to get a mixed blend of open space, enclosed space, a blend between patios, and a blend transition between the open park where UCIAN is. Two things. We're not keen on a water feature per se for long-term maintenance reasons, lack of success in a lot of these that we've seen, and that stormwater management can be used to work in the sense of rain gardens. We're not showing a covered shelter. The reason being, well, two. One is, however we fit it in, it just seems like it would be clutter too much in that site. And when you're there, there's a huge kind of open covered area within the UCIAN pavilion. I would think some lighter weight picnic tables could be placed there, but I'd like to think that can be used as a covered area to get more use. I'd like to think that this plaza and the UCIAN sort of work together to increase sort of the animation and use of that whole area and provide more of a connection through those green spaces way back to Stanquart Park. And those grasses, in there we also have a blend of mixings in of evergreen shrubs that would, broadleaf, that would have your dark, be show landscaping in the winter. Not large trees, kind of mid-size, so they don't kind of overwhelm a fairly small space, but size enough to provide shade. And Adrian, I think that wraps it up for me.
Great. Thanks very much, Tom. Would anybody else from your team like to add anything before we transition?
No, I don't think so, Asia.
Great. John, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, thanks very much for that. That's interesting. Well, we will go into a round of questions, as we usually do. And I'll start off with David first.
To ask a question about the existing pavilion at the moment, you're showing on your drawings that there's a loading bay there. Is that to be built with this new work, or is that existing?
That's a new proposed loading bay. Right now it's on the side.
Okay.
There's kind of a concrete wall, some stairs, and this is relocated to that. But I think it's also subject to exactly what the operators of it need. But so this loading and redone is off of Loggers Lane as opposed to being off of Main Street.
Okay. And the pavers as they're currently shown in the plaza, do they run in flush with the pavilion to the back there?
Pavers in the plaza. It won't be pavers, it'll be concrete.
Oh,
well,
sorry,
we're going to look at that. You mean, will it be at the flush level of the USIM? The USIM, yes. The USIM concrete is 2.6 meters. The building is 1.8. The middle of the road could be 1.8. But if we go, we're level-ish. But if we go from that up to make it flush to the USIM, I would have a grade of 5%. So we've been looking at that. So, excuse me, the way it sits now is that the plaza would be about a foot, half meter below the level of that concrete. And I think that will need to be looked at. Up at the front of the USIM, closer to Cleveland, it's flush. It meets grade there, so there's some stairs and things. So we'll probably do a bit of this to make that work. But it's interesting you ask that because I was just looking at that in detail, and I guess we'll work with how that whole operation and loading, et cetera, happens. It may be that we'll be below the USIM, and it'll be a planting bed or some way of making the grade and whatever kind of ramp or loading needs to be there.
Okay, great. You're showing some bike stands in your sort of examples, but I can't see any located on the site plan.
That's a good observation. There's some located right by the commercial building, right by the patios there. But having said that, we can place them as we see fit.
Oh, I see. Okay, so they're right at the south, beside the main building, tucked in that corner. Okay. And then so we're told that the road is shown curved, but it might be straight. Can you maybe talk a bit more to that? What's the rationale or the preference?
That's a good question. The very original, we have had it straight, and then there was discussion with the district to add a chicane or a curve. And we showed that, and then we kind of felt it should be straight just for the logistics of it. the vehicle passage. It's very hard to draw a big kind of twist in it, and the one you see is very mild. It almost doesn't do anything. And I think the district has had discussions internally with engineering and have said it should be straight. I think for safety, simplicity. I don't know, but I've seen the Valley Trail here in Whistler, and they go through the woods, and I think some of the planners have gone and put in a big, beautiful twist, and you go riding down, and you go, what is this doing here?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're just not inclined to want to do that when you're commuting to school or to work or something. So that's part of the rationale.
Okay. And then in the Plaza element sheet, there's different types of light bollards. There's traffic protection. There's like a zoomed out image of the bike stands. Have you chosen these items yet, or is it all sort of?
Yes, pretty much. You're seeing the Maglin exact-lifting table. You're seeing the Vega light. You're not the district, if I understand correctly, and the commercial project has a bike rack that's very similar to the one you're seeing in that image. So we've sent some of the specifications to AJ, and I guess we'll be working on that as well. I recommended or shown a Paul bear-resistant garbage container, but I imagine the district may have some very sharp ideas on what they use in their parks. So some of these may vary a bit. And that bollard style, that's a one-level bollard. They make similar ones that are like maybe 2 or 3 meters height. And then they can be lighting. It might be right in a planter wall or something, or by a bench, so that the intent is to have several levels of lighting. And I think lighting is important enough there that it warrants its own sort of detailed working drawing level of resolution.
Perfect. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. We'll go next to tennis.
Hi. I'm just wondering about the sculpture that's shown in the middle of the plaza. I don't know what the logistics are of the site or ownership or that sort of thing, but is there opportunity for that to move?
John, I can take that question.
Asia?
Okay.
Yeah. So through the chair, yes, we've indicated that we're totally open to moving that sculpture. If there's a better spot for it to be moved to, then we'd like to see that happen.
Okay, and then the loading for the pavilion, is that also flexible, or is that something that's being dictated by the operator of the pavilion? It's just shown for reference. It's not designed in. I'm not sure.
I can take that question again too, John, if that's all right.
Okay.
Yeah, so we referred the plans to, there's a few groups who consistently use the pavilion, so they've only seen the first plans and provided feedback, so I'd like to get the revised plan sent to them for their feedback. They didn't have any strong feelings, except that they obviously want it to be very usable and functional in terms of loading. I think from staff's perspective, we'd like to minimize the amount of paved open areas, and so if the loading can be shared, say, with the food truck and the open market area, then we'd like to see all of those uses shared rather than creating an explicit loading space. So I think that's kind of the direction that staff are leaning on, but definitely we'd like ADP's opinions and feedback on that.
John, can I interject one thing?
Yes.
It's going to go back, I think a bit of that might be driven by David's earlier question about how we're meeting the levels and how we drive vehicles in and what level they'd ideally like level vehicles to unload and unload. So it's got its own complexities because that level against USIM will drive the grading and drainage and levels on that whole side of the of that plaza, depending on how we step it or stage it. And I think loading and unloading speakers and the width of things and how they roll them up and back is another level of complexity.
Okay, and then might be for Asia again here, last one, just the sidewalk on the back of Loggers Lane. I mean, there's nothing there, the road, the bike lane, the fence behind the park. Is there plans for that to become a sidewalk, or what's happening to that road edge along the back of, between Loggers Lane and the park?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tanis. I'm probably not the best staff person to answer, but Loggers Lane, the ultimate design of that is very connected to the oceanfront development, and designing that is kind of a larger project that our engineering team's working with the oceanfront team on, and there's kind of a critical piece of that old BC Rail line that's currently being used quite informally. So hopefully in the near future we'll have some better answers to that. But in the interim, at least, to my knowledge, there's no plans to revise the sidewalk or to add in anything along that kind of eastern edge of Loggers Lane adjacent to the park.
Okay, that was all my questions. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, sorry I couldn't answer.
Tanner. We'll go next to Sarah.
Can you hear me any better? John?
Yes, that's good. That's great.
All right, okay, cool. So, this question's for Tom. Can you tell me about what exactly you're planting on the corners? Like what's the height of that material going to be?
Oh, those are grasses. They'll peak out at about 18 inches, 2 feet. Grasses and perennials, yeah.
Okay, they're not super tall grasses. Good. And then with the site furnishings, are these benches that you're putting in, are they being built, or are you ordering them and they're coming as is?
We have the option. The one you see in the slide is made by a company called Street Life. Something similar could be custom made. The long linear benches you're seeing, those are going to be custom made. They're going to have a sort of like an L-shaped concrete base with a wood capping. So that's how we're getting those odd shapes and long linear shape as well.
Have you considered putting any armrests, like maybe in the middle of one, that looks sort of a 4x4 kind of?
Yep, that'd be no problem.
It might be sort of deter people from grinding the edge, as well as giving somebody who needs an armrest to lift themselves up.
Yep.
What's the width of between the legs on the picnic table? Do you know that?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
And I had a discussion with Saltaire about, so we have options of accessible picnic tables that we've placed in projects before with the longer side of it.
I like the clean look of that, but I'm just not sure.
But at the end, can you roll? That's a thought I had as well. At the end, can you roll in
between that?
In between it.
Yeah, CSA calls for 800. You could probably get it a little bit narrower, but not by much. So just a thought. And can you explain the panel curb to me? To me, is like the profile like a rollover curve, or is it?
No, if you imagine, it'll be about almost 2 feet wide.
Yeah.
A foot deep, and either dead flat on the top and flush with the concrete on the side, or to have a dip in it for drainage.
Okay.
And you see them along bus stops or somewhere where there's a break between asphalt, concrete, and pavers or something.
Okay.
Maybe, yeah.
It's quite a shallow.
It's shallow, dead flat. Yeah.
And then where exactly are the kind of warning signs going to be
Well, we've indicated,
to this?
I haven't got to that. Haven't got haven't got to that level of resolution, but they'll be at the front. And I think we've indicated on some of the lamp posts, it's a combined post and signs. To me, you'll see it as soon as you turn in, there will be a unique sign that says this is a special area. We haven't worked exactly what that is. That's why I was curious when I was taking those photos in France. And I think my companion complained about I could take pictures of signs. So I was looking at those warning signs and what do they do here and why do they do it? So I think it's going to fall into sign standards that are for traffic that say what these are. We haven't got, you spend a lot of time figuring all that out, but I think it's something we'll research with graphic communication, sign companies that have done that kind of thing before.
Sure. And then, along with that, has there been any sort of consideration for kind of publicity that this, about this plaza space being a shared use, just to sort of give an education piece to people?
Special place designed by Tom Barrett Limited. Oh.
Yes, dumb it down, right?
And the district of Squamish. And not to forget Salterra.
Yeah. Now, what's the width between the benches on the south side? Because they seem that they're, you know, like maybe 1.5 meters. You know that?
No, I don't know off the top of my head. At the south, the width of the actual seating?
No, the width between the seats. Like, so it's basically about the width of those bands of color.
Yes, 2.5 meters. Because those, you know, that road is 7 meters wide, and those orange, the bands about 3 meters. So I'd say those are, one of them looks like about 3.5, the other looks like about 2.5.
Okay. And then, can you remind me, because I think that there is a ramp that goes into the pavilion, and I think that the ramp is on the loading zone
yes,
side.
that's exactly right. Yes.
In which case, then I think that you should extend the paving of maybe one of the darker, I think it's the darker line, hang on. Yeah, one of the darker lines, like the second dark line from the east. If you just extended that to land in the loading zone, then anybody who needs to access from that side, you go onto Loggers Lane to then get into the space. And you said you haven't figured out the waste receptacles yet, like what they are going to look like, or heights, or anything?
The waste receptacles, right now, they are the style that's used in Whistler. Hollow.
Which aren't terribly accessible.
Way up there. Let's take a note of that.
Now, the final question that I have for you is whether or not any consideration is being given to any kind of tactile warning indicators coming in and out of Main Street. So that would be a tactile indicator for both traffic going into it, but also for anybody with a visual impairment not going into traffic.
Yeah, we just haven't shown it at this level.
Okay. Okay, those are all my questions.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Next, we'll go to Jackie.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. My first question is for the back side of the pavilion. If we could just go back to the slide that shows the picture of it. Is it possible?
Yeah, I'll try to pull that up. Keep going while I work.
Thank you, Aja. Thank you. So there's a part of the wall there, of the back side there, that is all just brick before the roof line. And is there any thought to somehow integrating that into the into the plaza.
What? Do you mean the existing pavers that are there?
No, I'm talking about the backside of the OSIAM pavilion. The wall is gray block.
The wall that's painted?
Yeah, it's painted gray. If we can get to the picture of it, yeah, no, one more.
The first slide.
Next one.
That one.
Mm-hmm.
So that bottom left-hand picture shows the gray brick. Is there any consideration to integrate that into the streetscape of the plaza using art, using structure, using cladding?
The answer to that, we haven't considered any alterations to the building whatsoever.
Okay, and then a second consideration is in terms of an event space or a temporary space, that stage faces into the park. Is there any thought to having some sort of temporary roof extension or just an awning that can be pulled out and stay put out to put a temporary stage facing the plaza versus only facing the park?
No, we have not considered that. That building, well, personally speaking, has got its own integrity. There's a fairly large covered area that I think you could make some adjustments to the ground as opposed to the roof.
Well, I'm talking about using it as an event space, one, in terms of extending any kind of just temporary awning, and two, the brick is very bland and it would not be sort of aesthetically pleasing to the plaza, the rest of the plaza, so hence my question.
At this point, we haven't considered either.
Okay. And then my second question is about the bollards. I take it that street will remain two-way traffic, and will the bollards be up right across both from end to end, or will they just be two in the middle?
There'll be a couple of a means of controlling and completely stopping traffic in whatever means that's possible, which we would see as two bollards, one in each lane at both ends of the road. And then as you turn in, a couple of warning ones that the steel bollard style that I had showed. So I think as long as traffic's open, those front bollards would be removed. And it'd just be a couple
Right, so they'd be temporary bollards so that, if you're going through two-way traffic. And then in the space where you had the orange sort of squares for potential tents and sort of tented areas, will they have in-ground plugs and electrical access and water access for people who will, vendors using the space?
Yeah. Yeah, in the planters, I don't know about water, but in the planters where the bollards are, or where the bollards are beside, we'll have outlets.
Okay, so the tent areas would have to send electrical wiring across the grounds, which would affect accessibility?
No, I think we would place these in spots that they're fairly close to these tents. An example is St. Clair Park, where we placed outlets along the walkway specifically for that purpose, if there'd be future farmers markets or tents or whatever. So the exact number of them and where they're placed, I think we would develop in our lighting and electrical plan.
So you're talking about above ground, not flat,
or
flush with the ground?
Be small posts in the planting, or I guess in the pavements. Some of these could be, or some of them are along the side of the ESIM. I think we try to avoid too many of them that have maintenance issues with dirt getting in them and such. or it may be that not every single one of those future tents has power, but some of them do. So we would have outlets in all the planters, and they double with Christmas lights or other functions.
Okay. All right. And in terms of traffic, and I'm not sure if this is a question for Asia or for you, John, in terms of the stops and the access onto the two main streets, the cross streets, Cleveland and Loggers, would those be four-way stops? Would they be a green light, flashing green light? Would they be like a yellow light hanging in the middle of the intersection that would flash and then change? How would that control traffic and then also pedestrian traffic crossing through there?
That's a major question.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Jackie. So there hasn't been any discussion around changing the intersection function from its current design. So the Cleveland main intersection is a four-way stop. Loggers is a through with a stop on the main street side. So none of that has been proposed to change at all.
Okay. And then just to go back to public art, are there any other spaces other than that back wall of the OSIM to consider public art, either on some of the planters or in terms of landscape sculptures or actual artistic sculpture?
I think that the way I can answer that is Solterra has made a fairly large commitment on public art. It's more on the building on the Loggers Lane side, so they've had you must be familiar with that process. So at this time, there's not, that I know of, any plans for any major public art within this plaza from Solterra.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Jackie,
sorry.
That's fine. I'll just quickly add to confirm what Tom was saying. So there was a part of the developer's community amenity contribution. They did do public art that is going on the frontage of the development across the Loggers Lane side. So I believe you might have had some involvement in that. So it is on the building, and there was nothing discussed related to the plaza at the time of rezoning.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Asia. No, I meant, I figured we weren't talking about the building. I thought we were focused strictly on the plaza, and so I was focused strictly on public art in terms of it being a public space, so public art.
Got it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. We'll go next to Graham.
Yeah, hi, thanks for the presentation. I had also questions about the infrastructure to support some of these uses. So following on Jackie's point, the electrical, are you considering all the uses that you're showing? Because food trucks certainly have a bigger draw than farmers market tents.
They don't happen to show on my site plan, but I know on the architectural and on the RETA versions, there's outline spaces for food trucks.
With the appropriate power requirements? Yeah, okay. I wasn't at the January meeting. Can you just clarify, I can't tell from either drawings in the report or this, the uses on the edge of the building? I'm looking, is it a commercial retail unit? And then on Loggers Lane side, is that a lobby for the building?
Andreas?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, so that building is commercial. So along the entire edge of the plaza, that's commercial office building. 4 stories along that.
Okay. Okay, thanks. And then just both the staff and the applicant. So in this contribution, have you had discussions about a management plan or operations? And is there any programming budget associated with that?
I can take this question for sure. So the idea is that the developer would build the amenity, but the district would be responsible for the ongoing operation and maintenance on the district road right-of-way and any park property. And then, of course, on the private property, the tenants would be responsible for operating whatever type of patios that are going to interface with the plaza. And if they're wanting to take over any of the district-owned space, then we would enter into our typical lease agreement with the operators about what that patio space might look like. So that's the general conversation that we have. We haven't gone into any further detail and have not had any discussions about budget for activation or for programming that space.
So all the space that falls on the back of the pavilion, that's under the district's jurisdiction, both for maintenance and programming events, etc.?
Yes.
Be clear? Okay. Okay, that's my only questions.
Great. Thanks, Grant. Brent is next.
Right. Thank you for the presentation. Quick, a few questions. Wondering, this might be for you, Asia, if you guys have talked about the speed that you're planning on signing this at? No.
No.
And then I had a question about the ramp up to sidewalk grade. I'm wondering if it's the full length of sort of the longitudinal tiles that are shown before you get into the striping between contrasting dark and light, and kind of what that grade is or would look like.
Well, we haven't ascertained that detail level yet, but it'll only go up, I imagine, 8 inches or so. So it's just a slight up to, I think the grade would probably be between the edge of asphalt to the top of sidewalk, and then go across and then possibly down a bit very gently. So it's just enough to show that it's not a flat road. I don't know how much difference it'll make, but it's enough for, it'd be curb height, perhaps a bit more.
I'll jump in quick just to say, Brent, too, or if any of the ADP members have opinions about whether they would like to see a steeper ramping in terms of like almost like a speed table design, totally give us that feedback in the comments period as well.
Yeah, right on. And then another question about the width of the drive aisle. So 7 meters, just sort of, I think I asked the same question the last time, but remind me what that is driven by.
So that came from district emergency services and engineering review, and they determined that 7 meters was as narrow of a width for two-way traffic that they would want to tolerate. And that's kind of where we landed on there. So that's basically as skinny as we think we can make the road to have two-way traffic back and forth.
Okay. Question with that, was that clear width considered between where there's any physical like impediments, or is it really just between the contrasting drop curb panels?
Can you clarify a bit more, Brent? Sorry.
Yeah, they're just like looking at the plan, the width between where there's the physical like obstruction, where the benches, planters are. Was that the width that was considered for that minimum 7 meter clear aisle, or is it really the width between the contrasting drop curb, even if it's completely flush? Just wondering if there's a way to narrow without, narrow visually without narrowing physically.
Yeah, so the criteria that we had given was just a 7 meter clear width. There was no discussion about kind of additional curb buffering width or anything of that sort.
Okay. I had a question about the crosswalk on Loggers Lane. I think in the context photo, it is shown crossing from the south side of Main Street. I'm just wondering if there's the rationale behind moving that to the north side.
I think ideally we'd want a crosswalk on both sides. I actually haven't dove into that with our engineering department, but I think we'd go with whatever connectivity made more sense, and that north side maybe better connects into that area that connects over to the park on the east side as well, the waterfront park.
Okay. And then Tom, if you could speak to sort of tactile indicators, just a question of what you're thinking for that tactile indicator surface or whatever that would look like.
Well, I guess my answer to that is a certain legal requirements or building code suggestions for tactile requirements. In the past, we've used the armor or some kind of yellow dotted.
Yep. Truncated domes.
Exactly. Textile pads, they're called.
Yeah.
Visual, it's sensory, and then depending on, I don't know what Squamish, different municipalities have different ways of doing actual curb cuts and how they're set and what. So as long as a person comes up to it, feels that they can, and visually what direction they're supposed to go in, as opposed to being misled. So there's sort of a whole level of requirement. I know in Whistler, I've seen it in New York, and in District of North Vancouver, just doing one is different specific ways of laying these things in and making sure they fulfill what they're supposed to do.
And would the intent be that is all the way along that drop panel curve, or is that only at curb cuts, say on Cleveland and Loggers Lane?
They are at the crosswalks and sidewalks, and then as you've gone through that transition, you want it to be as smooth as possible. There's no jarring or bumping, and perhaps Sarah can help me with that, but we'll meet whatever requirements are necessary for that.
Okay. Well, I have another question on the plan. There's a light that looks like it's sort of in Loggers Lane, crossing light. Wondering if that was, and there's just at the northeast corner of, the south side, I guess.
I think that's a remnant of the survey on my information-based information.
Okay, so that's nothing new or
change or maybe.
Okay. And then is there lighting at the crosswalk shown or planned, like pedestrian scale?
Well, there's at both ends of this tall street lights.
Okay.
Again, we'll phase that in with a lighting plan. What I don't want to see happen on these things I've seen before is, you can do an elaborate pedestrian level lighting only to have it overwhelmed by overhead lights.
Yeah.
So, we want to see it sort of transition. As someone walks into it, they see the next place. So there'll be some bit of dark between it. It's not just all going to be lit up like a laundromat. And I think Squamish district is becoming more and more sensitive to lighting and what it does and the end result.
Okay, yeah, that's all for me. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Brent. Okay, we'll go to Jenna next.
Okay. Hi there. Thank you for your presentation. A few questions. One of them, the big white curb band that you're proposing, is it just a curb or are there bollards along that way? There's a note indicating some bollards.
In my mind, the dashed lines you're seeing is sort of an indication of drainage. In my mind, they don't show very well because I do them at scale, but in my mind, the bollards are more up where you turn in on the streets. So you see a sequence of 2 or 3 of them on either side. and then the bollards would end. So, and if you're looking at it, because you saw those images in Nice, and I think they have those things all the way down, but that's a very crowded street, and there's very much of this going on. But I see them more as a visual guard, an extra level of visual warning as you drive in or walk into it. These steel bollards are here for a reason. That white curve is here for a reason. This is not a normal street, so your perception is up, your guard is up.
Okay, so the pedestrians crossing along the main street will have to go through the bollards on the main crossing as they're going north-south?
Yes.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay. Could you speak a bit to the events that you're planning to see? You spoke a bit about the farmers market. You spoke a bit about potential food trucks. I'm just wondering in terms of what events in general were expected for this plaza when you were having to navigate the programming.
That's a good question, and I think Andrea started that process earlier with the architecture and with the district. Of course, my level has been more to make sure those things can be fitted in, regardless of what they are. I'm not sure what they might be exactly. I think this plaza will go in over time, and events will evolve and sort of create themselves. Unless, AJ, you have more information on that.
Yeah, I can jump in for sure. So what I'm trying to do right now is reach out to the market organizers, the farmers market and the Squamish street market, to get an idea of whether they want to use this space, and if they do, what their needs might be, so that we can engage with some of our community stakeholders and actually see if there's opportunities or if they want to use that space. Because yeah, I think it's kind of critical that we try to, at least as best we can, answer that question of who will be using that for events, so that we know what their needs are. So I admit I'm kind of starting that process a bit late, but I'm trying to get in touch with them right now to start that conversation.
Okay, thank you. So I assume that the bollards that you're showing that are removable or retractable come a market event day, those bollards come up and no vehicles are allowed in aside from those who came in to set it up earlier that morning? Okay. If you wouldn't mind speaking a bit more to the surfacing, it's all cast in place concrete just with different colors, whether it be on the roadway or the plaza. It's continuous?
That's right.
Okay. Thank you for that. And if you could speak a bit to the trees and your approach to trees. And we're seeing on the north side of the plaza, it's very much an open space plaza, whereas on the south side is where we're seeing more tree, canopy, etc. Just wondering if we could hear your thoughts to your decision on that.
The trees are, what are they?
More in terms of layout, I think.
Yeah, well,
get some good
series of, actually not recalling, it's a series of mid-size street trees. Now, they're not like red maples that will grow huge. I see these going to peak out 6 meter height, 3-4 meter height, because the planters are fairly small. So you will see a fairly low level of planting, and then a deciduous tree that's 4 meters high, but they're good spacing all the way along. So very much like the cross section that was shown, that's a good relationship.
Yeah, I meant more the lack of trees on the north side. And
on the north side. Yeah, well, that's purposely left open. I guess we can add a few, but it's purposely left open for the potential events and such.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm wondering about if you could speak a bit to the programming of the plaza on the south side as it relates to the building. I know we're not speaking of the building specifically today, but how you saw the use of that plaza space. It's programmed quite differently from the north side, and I was hoping you could just speak to kind of the difference between the two in the configurations.
I think the best way to answer that is the biggest, the most on the north side is the most room to relate both to the park and the use I am, as opposed to the south side. And at the north side, I think is sort of more where the performances and events are oriented. So it's just to create this linkage between that side. So it would be one, we deliberately thought it would be one or the other. I mean, you can go through on both sides like the analysis showed, but in terms of actual gatherings and overflow between performances and back and forth, say there's a performance going on, or say there's several performances going on, some low-key performances in the Plaza and a larger one, folk festival or whatever, in the USIM, that's where you're going back and forth. Or there's performance linked to a market or a craft fair or something like that.
Okay.
More oriented to the north side as opposed to the south, because we tried to do on both ends. I think the two sort of nondescript, or you wouldn't have a sense of what to do in that. So.
Right, okay. You spoke briefly, thank you for that. You spoke briefly about the stormwater management, indicating that you were in early days with your civil engineer, but I'm wondering if you could speak a bit to what you were seeing as the potential for the stormwater management for the Plaza.
Stormwater management in a situation like this is you would have the water drain to a planting bed where it cools off, it goes into the earth and it cleans itself and it finds its way into the pipe system or the storm system that the Squamish has. It slows it down. It's basically what it's meant to do. So you're not gonna in a major rainfall, water would go to a rain garden, comes part way up, and then there's a opening or a drain. So that huge excess water would start going into your stormwater system probably fairly quickly, depending on how much of a reserve you have under the planting. So what it would do is catch probably 80-90% of the water that's flowing along towards these planting beds. The way a rain garden works properly, it's not really a bunch of drain off that goes in, but the roots, if it's in an organic kind of soil like in the forest, the water goes through where the roots die and renew themselves and die and renew themselves and soak their way down. And that's the principle behind it, so that the water, one of the things I learned is important, is the water as it leaves is not heated up overly much by the Plaza surface. It's cooled down, stopped before it flushes out. And having said all that, sometimes a storm system goes into the pipe and it may go to a whole stormwater management system further down the line where it goes through all that process. I don't know what it does, so you wouldn't maybe not need to do that. And as far as I know with the Athletes Village, we found that you wouldn't put the rain garden along the edge of the parking lot because the water was already going to a big detention pond, and from there it was going to another detention pond. So you would be almost like wasting effort on doing that. So that's why I say it's linked to the overall storm system. And if I had done the sort of detailed analysis of what I thought was going on, and then especially in Squamish with the water levels and the flooding, there's a different story going on in each area, only to find the civil engineer, well, no, this is the way it works, and this is what we're doing, and this is a long-range term because you've got different flooding effects. And I know right underneath the middle of that, I showed it in section, is a wide storm pipe. And I go, okay, well, are we dropping right into that, or where's the other catch basins? How do they link into the planters, et cetera? And then so you're getting out into a realm of storm civil engineering, complicated civil engineering.
Yeah. So the current layout of the planters, is that based on is it based on a stormwater management approach for the Plaza, or is that kind of a separate discussion?
I think most of it is a design feature. I know the planting bed, the long linear planting bed that I spoke of earlier that's set closer to the patios, that is thinking that will be stormwater management bed that water could go to. And you see it's broken, there's two planters in between, there'd be a pipe under it. underneath that whole system would be a piping system that might go to wherever it goes to. And those other planters, water can be taken in. So a lot of times when you see a storm water, you don't even know. Sometimes you're on streets in Vancouver or other places in Squamish, water subtly goes into that bed and from a surrounding area. And you don't really know. It's not an overt design. It's a trained design. It's just the way the water goes in, what it's meant to do with the soil, and a certain arrangement of pipes under it.
Okay, thank you for that. And my last question is with regards to seating. This plaza sounds like it's really meant to gather large groups of people, and I wonder if there was ever consideration for one big kind of feature bench, a big amalgamated mega bench or something of that nature, so that in these large events a lot of people could come and gather in one. I'm wondering if that was ever part of the consideration for this project.
Can you repeat that? One large bench, did you say?
Yeah, so I'm thinking of, for example, in Lonsdale Quay, there's a large mega bench in front of the Polygon Gallery where larger groups of people can gather, and I was just wondering if that was ever part of the.
No, I know the exact one you mean. I don't think this is a comparable space. These stacked ones that we showed partly serve that function. I guess it could be launched, whatever.
Okay.
But no.
Okay, thank you for that. Those are all my questions.
Okay, thanks, Jenna. Carlos is next.
Awesome, thanks for the presentation. A lot of questions have been asked, so I'll try to make this quick. Was there any exploration? I know that there's about 7 parking spaces located there currently, and I do understand the intent with the Woodruff design, but because you have commercial fronting this plaza, was there any investigation of adding some kind of parking spaces that could be used to the north side of that street?
I can jump in and answer. Pretty straightforward. No, we didn't want to see any parking along the street in this area. The development is providing a lot of commercial parking in their development, and then also the parking is being maintained along Cleveland Avenue as well.
Okay, and I guess on the flip side of that, is there any reason why this isn't just going to be a plaza permanently? Like, what is it? Fire access? Is that the real reason why this is being preserved as a throughway?
Yeah, so we wanted to keep it flexible so that we could potentially close it down in the future if that was determined kind of at the council level and in consultation with the community. For sure, fire has voiced strong concern around keeping that open as a emergency vehicle access, particularly to kind of quickly get down Loggers Lane and get down Main Street towards kind of the Aqua development. That's definitely the way that they would go if there was an emergency, and so they vocalized pretty strongly that they do want that kept open for at a bare minimum emergency vehicles.
Okay, and maybe you touched on this. I didn't quite get it on the northeast side of the parcel. I see that on the northwest side, you kind of step away the concrete, and it kind of blends into the lawn that exists on the pavilion, and then on the northeast side, it just is a straight line. Is there a reason for that, Tom?
Not specifically. I think on the plaza side, perhaps Andreas can help me because at this level we're working together on the plaza side, I thought about pulling the lawn more in, and so it's almost like an arbitrary, but as you walk into the plaza, there's some steps there. There sort of already is paving there that's replacing. So, it really don't bring too much lawn into the plaza. So The longitudinal ones that penetrate the sidewalk up on Cleveland is more just a design feature. I guess if you're walking, it differentiates itself from the ordinary sidewalk. You come walking along the building, you hit a new type of paving, new colors, it draws you into the patio, it draws you into a new experience. It's a corner plaza to the building. And it's meant to try to integrate the patio or the plaza pattern experience more with the sidewalk. That would be the only rationale.
Okay. Awesome. That's all my questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carlos. Okay, Christina?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for the presentation. I don't have a lot of questions. Almost all of my questions were answered. I did want to ask one thing about the drainage the panel curves that you were describing. Is that like what's at the Gateway bus loop that's dividing the visitor parking from where the buses are coming in? There's a little dip in the concrete there, like a swale almost.
Yes.
Is that the idea, or are you French draining or trench draining down into a closed system there?
We'll talk to our civil engineers about it, but I'm leaving the option that it can be a slight dip or it can be dead flat.
Right.
If it's dead
and
flat,
then the dip. Go ahead.
Depends on how we drain. I mean, I think the road will be crowned a bit. I don't think we'll have a swale in the middle of it. It may be we do a sheet drain right across the site because it's a bit higher on Loggers Lane side, but 1.5% to Cleveland. So it may be we have a long kind of sheet drains, some, as you say, some French drains, but I just want to leave that option open. Otherwise, it will be the purpose of it, if there's no drainage, the purpose of it is simply as a warning and to delineate the roadway.
Yeah, the difference in use. Thanks. And then the other thing I was just curious about is the scoring on the concrete. And you said it was sort of random, but also somewhat intentional. Is it intentional in terms of what's happening in that particular space, or how the
Well,
flow
it's
is working?
intentional. I think it's intentional. Instead of having an expansion, it's an expansion joint.
Right, but it doesn't have anything to do with the actual what's happening in that area.
No. And what I kind of show is to be more of the scoring in the roadway. I think.
Right.
Just that it's easier. It's almost like a false paving pattern.
Sure.
Because I didn't want to go anywhere near stamped concrete, but if I have score lines, that could be another way of just adding some complexity to it. I don't want to ruin the asphalt because of the concrete either, but it's just a way of trying to show some semblance of pattern, texture.
Right. Okay. And then I had questions about stormwater management, the rain gardens as well, but it sounds like you're very preliminary on that. I just was curious whether you were, utilizing the planters, or are these planters, or are they mostly at grade, these plant areas?
These are at grade.
Okay.
Having said that, they can be a bit below, and they can be dished a bit, or we can orient it, or perhaps there's a curve around it to whatever to suit that. I just want to learn more from civil engineers, from the district of Squamish. What is their overall storm system around there? Rather before I jump into that too much. Yeah.
Okay, and then just two other questions, and I apologize, I wasn't at that January meeting either, so if this was covered, you don't have to address it, but I was also sort of curious about the overall purpose of this. So immediately I was thinking, okay, well, is this intentional? Do we really need to have cars going through here? But obviously we need to keep it open for fire, as Asia explained. But, I'm just thinking as a driver, I would probably try to avoid this area and use any other means to get where I was going if there were going to be a lot of people in there. Is that the intent? Are we trying to actually discourage people from driving down here? Is that the idea?
I think, from what I understand, that is exactly the idea. They can, if you really want, you can go through, or you got to get somewhere.
Sure.
The idea,
I'd rather not.
when she saw those photos from me, so you were there, I mean, oh, I don't know why someone would want to try and drive down there, because there's a lot of people.
Right, it's gonna take forever.
Yeah, they probably have to make a delivery or get somewhere, or they're probably, taking a delivery to a restaurant or something.
Sure.
And then
but there's many other ways.
There are other ways
to get where you're going. Yeah. Okay, and then the other one was, when you're looking at the sidewalk that goes along the park, it's, maybe even less than half the width of the sidewalk that is then on I guess that's the north side. And then on the south side, it's a much bigger sidewalk. And I'm just curious as to whether that's just an existing condition, or what was the decision there to have, such a large sidewalk on the south side and such a narrow one on the north?
I think partly a graphic issue, and perhaps Andres can answer it, but I'm just showing, you're seeing a level of underground parking almost, or the parking level as vehicles go in, so it's to do with the building.
You're speaking about the Cleveland side, Cleveland Avenue side?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. On the south side, that sidewalk is new, and that's new streetscape basically for the commercial units that are in there. So we've got quite a wide public or semi-public space sidewalk in front of the units. And on the other side, adjacent to the park, that's existing sidewalk along there.
That's what I suspected. I just wasn't sure, but that's good. Thanks very much. Those are my questions.
Thanks, Christina. Most of my questions have been covered off. I'm just curious on understanding that Loggers Lane is a trucking route, will be maintained as such. So it's definitely busier in contrast to what we're creating here, which is very unbusy. And I noticed that there is some treatment as far as landscaping and whatnot to kind of say, hey, this is sort of an end of a pedestrian area. Look out, there's a trucking lane coming through here. Is there anything sort of special to that effect going to happen there on that end?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
It's more, has it been well thought out that it's quite a transition from a quiet area into what could be at times heavy trucks going past.
If I could,
the interface there is very important.
John, I think that definitely the Loggers Lane side of it is much more heavy traffic, and it's definitely not pedestrian oriented. The park itself doesn't even have a sidewalk along that side, and really there are sidewalks along Loggers as it stands at the moment, and that will probably stay that way for some time until that whole route gets redesigned. So the intent was to kind of permit passage across the street there to the section of park across from Junction Park, but really to downplay that. It's because we really don't see a lot of people transitioning across the road there, pedestrians or moving along Loggers Lane.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, I see that you because of the placement of the planters on the corner there, it's kind of having that effect that this is sort of the end of the street and the quiet zone doesn't continue, that sort of thing. So I just wanted to bring up the question in case there was any kind of special consideration on that other than what we see now. Okay, so my questions are all good right now. I guess we'll turn around and go for comments at this point, unless anyone else has any other questions.
I have one more question.
One more from Jackie.
Yeah, sorry. To both, I guess, Asia and Tom and Andreas, Asia was looking for direction on animating the space outside of special events. Was she talking about just the north side, and was it on a daily basis? Was it on like a weeknight, or I'm just trying to get clarification on what she's seeking for that space, or ask my next question.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jackie. I think what I was looking for from ADP is just your ideas of how that large open event zone might be utilized when there are not events occurring. So for like just throwing out some ideas that I had, could we paint markings on the pavement so that it can be like a hopscotch zone for kids? You know, like what can a large open place be used as when there isn't an event going on? I think that's where I was coming from with that comment.
Okay, and I do have some suggestions on that, which I'll make in the comments. So thanks for the clarification on that. But then my question that goes alongside that, and it goes back to traffic and how that space is used, is if there's traffic going through there on a daily basis, and you've got kids playing hopscotch or people sort of gathering in that, particularly in that northwest event area, how will you manage traffic and the movement of people to maintain safety? If you're not using lights or crossing flashing lights or any other sort of hands-on regulation, shall I say?
I can start, and then maybe Tom and Andreas can jump in as well, but I think that all of the different design cues, like the curb, the different colors, the signage, the layout, that's all trying to cue drivers that this is not their zone to be treated as a road, and it's not their area. And in my own personal opinion, by further activating that space and having more people utilizing that space, that just indicates to drivers that they're the guests and they need to move very carefully through that space, because it's pedestrian and park space primarily.
If I could add to that, I think all of the indications, the paving patterns, the banding, it indicates to the drivers that, you know, this is a slowed zone, especially if with the road being at the same level as the plaza and being higher than, say, Loggers Lane elevation. And those cues are also, they're there for the cars, but they're also there for people, so that depending on what the kind of mode the plaza is in, if it's a daily kind of thing, you know, a normal afternoon when cars are going down there, you know, people will tend to, you know, abide by those white stripes and not run out onto that space or move on to that space. But when the plaza is closed off, when we've got bollards in the end and people are all, you know, going over the entire space, then I think those indications are there as well, that traffic is not coming down here now. Now you're free to use the whole space.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we see that at Eagle Wing, just outside the senior center there, where when people drive up to that circle, they know that it's a calmed area. It's just that's probably have the same effect. I do have actually one more question for Asia, and this goes back to the January 23rd meeting in minutes. There was a heightened concern around parking and a relaxation of the stall count for commercial or related to the commercial space. So I'm just wondering, it was a request of ADP that was to be resolved with yourself and with planning. Was there any change to the parking at all as a result of that comment from that meeting?
Through the chair, that there was no change to any of the parking layout at within the development. The proposal is to do a portion of the commercial parking requirement as cash in lieu or a buyout of some of the commercial parking stalls, and that's still in place.
Okay, thanks. So considering that the commercial allotment of parking in the development could be suggested to be insufficient, for lack of a better word, I'd say that Carlos's point about any sensitivity to losing stalls along Main Street here might deserve some attention. And this is just purely for the viability of the commercial spaces once the businesses are in there. Anyway, I'll leave that for comments, but curious to know how that was handled. So we will, we are on to comments now, and I'll start with David Arnott once again.
Yeah, hi. I think it's a really unique plaza, and can see there's considerable working gone into it. I think we need to see a solution regarding that grade change between the pavilion and the plaza, so that really needs to be ironed out. I think we need more bike spaces in and around the plaza, especially if it's going to be used for people visiting events and such. I actually support the curved road, but maybe just a comment would be that it would be kind of more productive for us as the panel to see what was actually supported by staff or what was actually going to be enacted, because we're being asked to, review what will actually be constructed. And then I'm okay without the fountain, if that's a comment as well. Love the benches and the planting, and I think it's really amazing. Going to be a great benefit to Squamish. Thanks.
David? We go to Tanis next.
Okay, yeah, so I love the lunar principle. I'm seeing it happen, in a bunch of different municipalities, so I'm really excited to see it in Squamish. I understand the programming of this space, but I feel like the park side, so the north side of the street is just, I would like to see some more trees or some more planting happening over there. The south side right now has some really lovely mature trees, and obviously those will be removed for the development, but it would be nice to, sort of have a larger species on either side or introduce some more of that. I think if you move that sculpture on the north side, that would open some more space. Maybe the tents get programmed differently. It would open it up a little bit to maybe have a rain garden somewhere, or maybe along the edge with, opportunity for the trucks to come through that in some areas. The loading bay to the pavilion and the planter behind that, there's just this grass area right there. I think that could probably all become a planter. Maybe some larger trees go there as well, just sort of to delineate between those two spaces. There's chicane in the road. I think it's a small one. It's such a small little space. I don't think putting anything else in there is, I think it'll just be confusing for people in cars. So I think just straight is fine. I think that's all of my comments, but I think just maybe a few more planting areas and just the larger trees would create, maybe some shade for the people who are using the space and green it up a little bit more. But yeah, the concept is amazing, so I'm really excited to see this.
Okay. Thanks, Dennis. Next, we go to Sarah.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. I think it looks great. It's going to be a really interesting space. To begin with, I think with the site grading, that yes, coming up is going to sort of slow traffic down, but I'd want the crown to be kind of on the road, and though it's hard to sort of distinguish because I don't know how it's meeting the grade towards the pavilion, but just to be cognizant that at the edges where you're going to have pedestrian crossings going either across Loggers Lane or at Cleveland, that you're trying to reduce the slope there, so there's not going to be a big transition of going up a curb cut and then to another slope. There should be a pavilion that connects to the loading zone so that you can get the ramping. So whether or not there's a tree planted and then some, an extension of the paving that exists there, so you don't have to go down to Loggers Lane and risk life or limb. I would be inclined to just making reference to CSA guidelines, 4.3.5.3.2. Letter E, it says, an entry into a vehicular route or area where no curbs or other elements separate the vehicular route from a pedestrian route, there should be tactile attention indicators. So I would be inclined to put a strip all the way across Main Street between the planters, and I might be inclined to use like a cast iron tactile pad that would stand up to snow clearing and not need to be replaced every couple of years. The City of Toronto's done a study on it if you're interested to look at the longevity of those things. Site furnishing, some armrests should be added to not all of the benches, but some of the benches. And I would suggest, sort of sticking in the middle, probably like a 4x4 would be just perfect. Also, there aren't any backrests on any of the seating, but I noticed that in the, where you've got some granite stone seating, that maybe you could have, for instance, on the northeast corner towards the loading bay, there's a cluster of these basalt or granite stones, is that you could just simply have one that's slightly higher behind a lower one in front, and maybe facing towards the other grouping of the stacked wooden seating that you've got there would suffice to have one or two options for people who need a backrest. That the table, just to ensure that you've got as close to 800 millimeters between the legs as possible to allow somebody to get under the end or extend that tabletop. Be sure that the trees that you're planting over the benches aren't going to have any protruding hazards that are going to poke anybody in the eye who's got a visual impairment. So that really does happen. Site furnishings, pathways, and the waste receptacles, the lid shouldn't be any higher than 1,060 millimeters, what CSA recommends. And I think that's about the extent of my comments. Just that the space, be cognizant that the space between the benches, you're saying it's about 2 meters plus, but if you've got a wheelchair sort of sitting next to a bench talking to a person, then you've reduced your space by 800 millimeters. So just to be wary of that. And if your gardens that are on the south side towards the building are going to be more of a rain garden that it's sloping down towards them, that a lower bed, is just to have a little bit of edge protection so that nobody's inadvertently rolling into the garden. And otherwise, I think it looks great. Good work, you guys. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Jackie, next.
Thank you. This was, it's really exciting to see this space coming to shape and form. My comments in terms of public art, the back, the north side, particularly the back of Ossian Pavilion, that gray block area, I would really consider mural art or a green wall of some sort. And barring that, another suggestion in terms of animation that I'll come to in a moment. Also in terms of public art, the site furnishings, like the wooden benches and things like that, those can also be public art as well as functional, so please consider that. The event infrastructure, I'm glad to hear that you're going to be talking to some of the people who may or may not be using that space, but also consider when you're using it for other non-major event animation like hopscotch and children playing and buskers playing, that the space is safe, well lit, and properly serviced from water and electrical and that sort of thing. In terms of animating, again, I go back to the suggestions of having buskers on a weekly basis in the space. Also having something like a movie night where the back wall is used as a projection, and also you can use the back wall, you can project art on to keep it flexible, keep the space. You don't have to maintain the paint, you can just project art onto it from an overhead projection. So something to consider for that part of the space. And event traffic, large or small events, given the trucking traffic on Loggers Lane and the traffic on Cleveland, that there will be pedestrians, there will be cars, there will be bicycles, and all other manner of vehicles in between, to consider some sort of better traffic management system in both those spaces. And thank you. Those are all my comments.
Thanks, Jackie. Graham next.
Yeah, thanks to staff and the applicants for this. Excited to see this come to downtown Squamish. I think it'd be a great addition to the pavilion there, a great space. I could see moving from the grass and watching a show on the pavilion into this space and visiting some of the patio spaces. For these spaces to be really successful, though, a lot of the details really have to be thought out, especially hardscaped places such as this. So, like Jackie says, I'm encouraged that staff is starting to engage with some of these users and find out what they need. I really hope those details are conveyed back to the design team and the applicant before this all gets signed off, because they're very important elements, especially the electrical outlets. If you're going to do some of the things you want to do around food trucks, farmers' tents, you're going to need a sufficient amount of both 15 and 20 amp outlets to plug in your iPad, plug in your truck. Otherwise, you end up with a bunch of generators running, which both noise and air pollution, which nobody wants in this environment. Other elements, seating, picnic table seems kind of lonely, so maybe a few more, or just continue with the linear seating, and some of the log and stone probably would scatter nicely around the perimeter of that market layout. As far as other ideas to staff for that event area outside of events, you could look at temporary movable seating that people can pick up, move around, and gather, which has been so successful in other urban plazas. Or you could look at the city of North Van with their Playbox program, their lockbox. Those would be two ideas, but again, those really play into a management plan and a budget. So you'll have to leave that to staff to work out. Just finally on lighting, that pole lighting that's on the street edges, I hope that can be something that's unique and kind of character defining for the entrance of this, what's going to be a great space, and not just the standard district light standards. I know engineering always resists buying things outside of their standard catalog, so I hope you can get something interesting. And then also agree with the point that more bike racks are needed. I see 5 Class B spaces outside the patio, but I think you could have them on both street edges, several more just to support arriving by bike to the space. That's all my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. Brent is next.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I agree with many of the comments that have already been said. I think this is super exciting for Squamish and really will create a point that will draw people to it. And similarly to what Graham had just said, I think that those details are extra important when it's something new and different, and especially something that is encouraging mixing of modes. So to follow up my comment on the ramp coming into the Wiener, I think that making that deep so it acts more like a speed table and not a long driveway ramp is important to sort of designate that space and slow down vehicle speeds. I think that the drive aisle width, narrowing the drop curb panels significantly would be beneficial just from creating a visual narrowing for drivers, even if there is a clear space that's wider than what is actually contained within those drop curbs. So like measuring the distance between the benches shown on either side, it looks as though it's about a 9-meter clear width, and so I think that potentially could create some dangerous issues. Following up on Sarah's comment, I think that some sort of tactile indicator between the pedestrian realm and the roadway is important, and if there's not a drop in grade or some sort of beveled curb through that section, that some sort of indicator, whether that is truncated domes or something, is important. There's some examples from other cities in Canada and around the world. Thinking about the corner radiuses, I think once again, looking at speed control, that the corner radii coming into Main Street could be tightened up on all 4 corners, really identifying that this is a space for slow traffic and you want vehicles to go slow. Large vehicles, unless absolutely essential, shouldn't be passing through. I think the comment about keeping the loading space contained within that open plaza area, kind of similar to as it is something that I would support. I think having additional paving where you don't need it isn't required. And I think that is it. Yeah, super excited to see when this gets built and be able to actually go use it. So, thank you.
Thanks, Brent. Jenna, next.
Okay, thanks. So I'll start with vehicular movement. Thanks for sharing your studies thus far. I think as it continues to evolve, it's really important to always keep in mind that pedestrians are first and vehicles are second. So I think all the decisions should really hinge on that point to make sure that they are front and center. And I really like the idea of the one-earth. I think that's really exciting, and it will be important to be mindful of the one-earth, the Squamish version of a one-earth. So there's a lot of great examples from Europe, but we do need to be mindful of that's a very much day-to-day cultural experience there, and we just, as we go through and do the detailed design, we really need to think of the lens of the Squamish person and how this isn't a day-to-day thing. So the tactile warnings and texture changes and material changes, et cetera, need to be quite explicit because it's just not an inherent thing, I think, yet. Hopefully it will be soon. So I would say the transition, echoing the earlier comments, the transition from the Main Street turning in needs to be really, really clear, not only with the gradient change, but I would also say a materiality change. I would encourage consideration for a material that's very different, not asphalt. Maybe it's a textured unit paver or something of that nature that gives a very distinctive visual cue also that this is a very different place that car is entering into. And then with the bollards, I think, that's sort of where my comment comes from. Peds come first, where the main pathway, the main sidewalk is being kind of limited by a row of bollards through their main path of travel. So I would encourage consideration on how those bollards I think they're really important to make sure that car stays where it's supposed to be, but that pedestrian traffic is primary. And I would echo Sarah's comments about the tactile warnings. It's nice to hear that there's some great opportunities beyond tactile domes. They're just not really nice to look at, and something like a Corten would be quite lovely and really speak to the local character and history. I think that would be great. Okay. And then in terms of layout, I think there's, you know, in these large spaces, there's always a balance of the event versus the everyday. And it'd be good to do another layer of what that everyday looks like. I would encourage more trees, whether they be like a boulevard tree or a random pattern or whatever it might be. I think it would really help create a really strong sense of place, a lot of shade. But if the trees are nice and tall with a really big crown and high canopy, you'd still be able to have that event space that occur under the trees. I think to, for example, Salt Spring Island, which is quite a famous market and has many, many trees, and it works really, really well together because those trees are nice and large. So something like that, I think, would benefit really well. And then just in terms of the market layout, I do wonder, I'm just curious what would happen if the layout was linear. Often markets are very linear and circular, and I think that might have some interesting considerations on how that Northern Plaza would reconfigure if the stalls were linear. Long and linear, I think it would actually allow for a bit more potential flexibility of that space. Yeah, it'll be interesting once, it sounds like the events are a question mark, so it'll be interesting to see how those shake up and how that informs the space as well. But I wonder if it'd be worth considering north and south being equally weighted in terms of event space. Right now, south is very much for kind of use of the building. North is for events, and it could be interesting to see what would happen if the event was considered amongst the whole. It might even out and break up the big space and allow it to have a bit more programming in there. In terms of the furnishings, I think something like a mega bench could be quite interesting, particularly on those off days when it isn't an event. It could become quite a lightning rod for the people to come and gather and just hang out. And then when there's an event, it would just be completely populated and loved. Be an interesting consideration. And then the last point, stormwater management. I really think that, you know, to echo staff's comments, I think this really could be a really key feature to the plaza that could really inform the shape and character of the plaza. And it could be a really important educational opportunity as well for the community to see the water moving, and maybe it's hitting really interesting materials with textures, and you're seeing it connect into this rain garden and understanding the story of how the water is moving. I think it would be a really important story to layer into the plaza and have it inform the space of it. And yeah, those are my comments overall. Thanks so much for a good presentation.
Thanks, Janet. Carlos?
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, so I think Jenna's absolutely right. Pedestrians come first, which is why I'm surprised I haven't heard more of my colleagues on the panel just say, like, this should just be for pedestrians. I think that's kind of the intent with the design. And so if emergency access is something that's required, then I would say have the proponent install motorized bollards and give control of that to the emergency department so that the majority of the time this can just be used as a plaza as it's kind of designed and intended to be. I think it's going to be great for the development, but it's also going to be great for kind of this next phase in our evolution in this part of South, like the southern downtown of Squamish. Like, we're seeing a huge chunk of density arrive at a downtown Squamish section, and that's going to make this vibrant. because with that density comes a lot of that vibrancy. And so my question about parking on the Winter Street was a bit tongue-in-cheek, because we're exploring winter streets on the village and the oceanfront, and we are incorporating parking because it's going to be out in the middle of nowhere for the first few years, and with the intent that it eventually becomes all pedestrianized. And I think the nice part about this development is you're around that density, so you can look at having it be pedestrian only at the outset. And then I will clarify my position on parking a little bit, if I could, that I think a reduction in parking in this location is not necessarily a bad idea, because like you said, the adjacent development does provide for a lot of parking. And then I think that shared parking models that share visitor space for residential and commercial should be looked at within our downtown quite a bit, because I think we don't want to be attributing a whole bunch of space to parkades that sit empty a lot of the time. Couple minor comments. In addition to your kind of detailed plans of how this plaza is going to be used with electrical requirements, maybe just look at tie downs as well. I know I've done some consultation during some festivals and events, and it does get really windy in that location. So having tie downs for those tents would be great. A personal hope is that we can move away from this arbitrary curved street idea in a lot of locations. I think there's a lot of tools in the toolbox to slow traffic down, including narrower widths and planting, and I think this kind of arbitrary curving of the street creates a lot more conflict at times than it does actually slow things. So there's a lot of tools in the toolbox to deal with that. That would be my recommendation on that. So going straight with that street, not a bad idea, but even better would just be to block access to it entirely. Yeah, I think that's all the points I have, and it's going to be a great addition. I think it's exactly what our town needs in this location to help support all that density. And so I think it's really exciting and good work to the team.
Thanks, Carlos. Christina.
Yeah, thanks very much for the presentation, and I agree with much of what everyone else has said. I think the project really is well thought out, and it's very elegant. I think it's much needed in this location as well. Some of the things I can't stop looking. I have the drawing behind on my other screen. I can't stop looking at the curve, and I don't really see the necessity for it. I think it probably should be straight. Even if it's even there, and I go back to, one of my questions about, why are we doing this in the first place, is kind of what Carlos is saying, is that, maybe we don't really need to invite vehicles in there that aren't emergency vehicles. I tend to be leaning that way myself. I think that would possibly open up more potential for softening the space a little bit if we don't have to maintain like a traffic flow through there. And maybe there are movable bollards, maybe there's movable planters. I'm looking at, the north side of the plaza and where the sculpture and the log sitting circle and the stacked seating are, and I'm thinking, well, if those are elements that are fixed in place, those might be opportunities to get some kind of planting around them, because they are always going to be there, and those spaces won't be available for the market tents or food trucks. So that might be one spot to do that, and maybe you could actually sort of invert some of these fingers and bring the green from the park in more, I'm thinking, possibly. And maybe that could happen from the boulevard on the other side as well. So, other than that, I think, maybe trying to bring a little bit more green in for those periods of time when there isn't an event happening. I agree. And I think, if you do want to maintain a traffic flow, I think raising it up is also a really good idea. But I think the focus really needs to be the pedestrian focus and the cyclists, and I echo the need for more bike racks as well. I think that That covers, yep, that covers everything for me. Thanks very much. Great project.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to risk a little bit of disagreement with the last two comments. Actually, I tend to like the curve of the street because of the aesthetic and the playful nature of it. The lineal shapes that we see so much of in society is starting to get boring. So I really appreciate this, the curve in there, functional or not. I don't think it's going to make a difference at the end of the day. It's a slow driving zone and there's still lots of visibility there. So, and as far as it functionally being shut off during certain times and not others, I think if you close it off permanently, then it's just putting a load on other intersections downtown. So it's a give and take. I would suggest that most of the time when I've ever been down there, it's a ghost town and that it might as well allow for someone to pass through. But if we design it so that it has either functionality, then we can make those decisions and being hard set about which way it's going to function right now as far as design. So I kind of agree with the way this particular design works. As for the parking that I mentioned, not trying to put words in your mouth, Carlos, I just feel a grave concern for the commercial viability down there if we're taking away commercial parking spots that should be allotted for their viability. And I'm not particularly supportive of a parkade being 4 or 5 or 6 blocks away that, in my experience, have been problematic on their own. So I would rather see it addressed now at the site where the commercial sits. A couple of small comments. One is about the loading zone there, and having a lot of experience with special events and whatnot. You'll find if you have a big show in the park there, it's not just a single load in that happens. There's some transfer during the festivals and during the shows. So I think that this, as much as I would love to see it all be grass, this loading zone is actually very necessary as far as it being on the side that's away from where the public might end up congregating in a big event. And there might need to be continuous loading to and from the side stage for different acts and whatnot. So I kind of would suggest that being there. If it's a permeable type paver or something like that, that's fine. But I think the way it's designed right now is solving the fact that we're taking away the loading zone on the other side of the building during events. When I look at that picnic table, and I just noticed now that it seems a little bit odd to sit it right out next to the edge of the street. Somebody walks off the side of it into the street. That's not a good thing. I would turn it 90 degrees so that everyone sitting at the table can look down the table at the chief rather than half the group with their back to the chief and half facing it. And maybe get it a little bit over towards the planters on the north side, away from the street. Just a suggestion, functional. What was my other comment? The only other one is that I agree with the use of the way that you've used the bollards and on both ends of the street. I wouldn't suggest any more down the middle, but I'll leave that to you. Has anyone else got any other comments before we wrap up? No more. Okay. Jackie has one.
Yeah, just to echo Carlos and a couple of the other people. Yes, weather is a big issue in Squamish, and rain and wind. And just when you're considering the event space and the requirements of people using that space, whether it be play boxes or performers on a temporary stage in that corner, or tents that you also consider a temporary awning as well to cover for rain. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. Okay, so the next we move to our recommendation, and I'll read the 4 different recommendations that we can go through. I've done before. Recommendation A is that the advisory design panel supports the project as presented and does not need to see this project returned for further review. B is that the advisory design panel supports the project as presented and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. C is that the advisory design panel supports the project as presented and would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations and return to present the revised project. And D is that the advisory design panel does not support the project as presented for the following reasons. Any discussion on which item? Sarah?
I would like to put a motion forward for B. Use involved.
B? Carlos seconds that? Okay, I'll call the question that we recommend item B. Anyone against? No one against. So our recommendation is item B. Any special feedback towards recommendations?
To really look at the site grading of how they're going to grade to the pavilion, as well as the amount of up to the crossroads.
Okay.
And to consider all the users of the space and to consult with not just the 2 markets, but also any people performing, anybody programming the space for children, anything like that, to also be part of the stakeholder consultation.
And to integrate the appropriate infrastructure, to integrate the appropriate infrastructure to support those events, with being outlets, underground conduit, etc.
Yeah, I totally agree with that one. That's a good idea to be thoughtful of on both sides of the street. Mm-hmm. Any other comments that should be raised above the rest?
I would speak to the stormwater management strategy.
Okay.
And I was going to say, sorry, go ahead, Jenna.
And the tree canopies. Go ahead.
But yeah, I was going to say pedestrian safety. So I think figuring out whether this really is it is not whether it is a pedestrian space. This is a pedestrian space, and that needs to be at the forefront. So whether that is emergency access only or further treatments to ensure that pedestrian safety is, maintained.
Yeah, I agree with that on the Loggers Lane side in particular, where the traffic pattern changes.
Yeah,
and increasing some of the Class C bike spaces.
Yes.
Yeah, just in terms of the pedestrian vehicle intersection, is that they might want to have some sort of publicity or, educational outreach to the community to let them know, hey, this is a new thing, and not only look at the signs, but be wary.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. Tom and Andreas? That's it for this project. We would go next to terminate the meeting, unless anyone has any discussion points. Sarah?
Over.
Anyone to second the termination? Brent will second. Anyone against? No one against. Meeting is terminated.